Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast. I am your host, Dylan Lasagna, and this is episode number 235 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. In this episode, we're here to talk about another week that was and another week that will be around the 2024 NFL season. This past week being week number 15, and another week that will be week number 16 coming up very shortly, very soon. So a lot to talk about here in this episode. Another jam-packed week and another week that will be around the NFL. But before we do, make sure you follow Very Cold Lasagna on social media, whether it's on Twitter or /X and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And for all my audio listeners out there, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you continue on listening. Leave a review, rate it 1 to 5 stars, whatever you got to do. And for all the people watching on YouTube, make sure you smash the like button. And if you're not already, smash the subscribe button, which you should, by the way. And smash the notification bell so you'll be notified of each and every upload. And then leave a comment down below with your own takes on each and every episode topic. And this one being the week that was, week number 15, and the week that will be, week number 16 in the NFL season. And share this with your friends, share this with the neighbor, share this with a stranger, and share with your colleagues, whether it's your coworkers, whether it's your peers at school, what have you. Share the good, the bad, the ugly about Very Cold Lasagna. So, that being said, let's get into this week that was, week number 15, around the 2024 NFL season. A bit of a sloppy week as we get into the last legs of this regular season. We're getting down to the wire I'd say about almost 3 weeks left in this regular season, and the playoff picture is getting a little bit clearer per se. And if I sound a little raspy, if I'm like slurring my words more than normal, I mean, it's that time of the year. I know it's holiday season, but it's like, damn, I might be coming down with something, but I'm trying not to, pal. So bear with me as we try to traverse through another episode, even with that's like this, pal. But anyway, let's get into the week that was in week number 15 around the NFL. Checking in on the playoff picture pre-week 15. We already know who was in the playoffs. We knew the Bills were in, the Chiefs were in, the Lions were in, the Eagles were in, and we already knew who was already preparing for the January Cancun cruise. Those teams were the Giants, the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Jets, the Browns, and the Titans. Going into week number 15, you had a couple of teams that could clinch the division, like the Philadelphia Eagles and the Houston Texans. And you also had a couple other teams that could clinch their spot in the postseason dance, like the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you also had several other teams that can hop on the Cancun cruise, like the Panthers, the Cowboys, the Bears, the Bengals. So who is going to clinch their spot in the January dance, or who's going to clinch their spot in the Cancun cruise? So let's talk about it in the week that was, week number 15. Starting with the Thursday night game, only for that Jeff Bezos money, for $15.99 a month, pal, or however much Jeff Bezos is raising those prices, as the 49ers, my San Francisco 49ers, hosted the LA Rams in a very sloppy, rainy, and low-scoring affair. Yeah, both offenses were pretty limited in this one. But Matthew Stafford, he made a long bomb play to Puka Nacua that led to Josh Carty making one more field goal that was just enough for the Rams to beat my San Francisco 49ers, getting a key division win, and more importantly, sweeping the division series between both of these teams. The Rams beat my 49ers 12-6, and the Rams, they seem to have the inside track to win this division, as long as they can play more consistent in these last 3 games, and they hope that Seattle slips up even more. But we'll talk more about Seattle once we get to them in this week that was. But it seems like the Rams right now, they're playing with a lot more conviction, especially offensively. And as like I said earlier in the regular season, like they're dealing with a lot of injuries. And as they get healthier, they were gonna be playing much better. So here they are now. They're healthier now, and sure, there's some dips in consistency, but once they get there, once they get it together, then they play a lot better. So the Rams, yeah, it seems like they'll be the one to represent the NFC West in the playoffs, and they might be a team that nobody wants to face in the NFC. At least like in in the first two rounds at least. Meanwhile, for my San Francisco 49ers, they knew what the stakes were in this one. It was pretty much a must-win game, like an absolute must-win for as delusional as the faithful were. But in this one, they absolutely no-showed in this one, other than besides the defense. But where was the offense? Like, the offense didn't show up in this one. Like, I hate to say it, but Brock Purdy, he played one of his worst games of his career, like in his short career, especially in the elements again. He like underthrew a lot of passes. He didn't do well. Finding Debo, finding George Kittle for the most part. Yeah, the season's basically over for San Francisco with 3 games left, and now they should be doing what I thought they should have been doing, like once they lost to the Bills. Now it's hashtag losing them all, pal, losing them all. And before I move on to the next game, I also didn't notice, like when I made the separate dedicated reaction recap to this game, I didn't know that Devondre Campbell, the linebacker, he pulled some dumbassery walking out of the game in the third quarter, and that left us empty-handed, short-handed, because Dre Greenlaw, he couldn't come back in the game, and he had no linebackers left. So that was another reason why the Niners lost the game, because, well, their defense was short-handed. And Devondre Campbell deservedly got suspended for the rest of the season, not released, because, well, some other team might have picked him up. But, yeah, he deservedly got suspended. And, yeah, that's pretty much the end of his season and possibly his career. So moving forward to 49ers, I mean, they got 3 more games. Once they officially get eliminated from the playoffs, it's time for Kyle Shanahan to shut down the majority of the starters and just let the young players play, man. Like, see what you have in store for next year. Meanwhile, looking at the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion, the Dallas Cowboys went to Carolina to take on the Panthers, as that Cowboys defense forced 6 turnovers on Bryce Young in a total beatdown of Carolina, 30-14. So, yeah, that Dallas defense, yeah, they're beat up. They don't have Overshown anymore. They haven't had DeMarcus Lawrence for about 10 games now. I mean, they still have Bryce Young. Not Bryce Young. Micah Parsons. They still have Micah Parsons, and that defensive line, that depth, it's still been doing all right. But, I mean, to fairness, they're playing a crappy Carolina team. So it'll be up to the Dallas defense if they can replicate that performance next week against a red-hot Bucs team right now, who will have more to play for than this Panthers team. So not really much to say about this game. So we'll move on to the next one, as the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Cleveland Skid Marks, as the Chiefs bullied the Skid Marks so hard that they benched Jameis Winston in the fourth quarter, because Jameis Winston threw 3 interceptions in this one. Again, with Kansas City finally having a somewhat stress-free game, beating the Skid Marks 21-7. They didn't have to worry about a close one this time around. But this game came at a little bit of a cost for Kansas City, because Patrick Mahomes, he left the game with another ankle injury, mild high ankle sprain is what they called it. So he was limping off the field, and apparently, yeah, there's no damage to the ankle. And from what I read earlier this week, he was practicing fully. Interesting. But yeah, he has a shot to play in their next game. So we'll see how practice continues to unfold for the Chiefs, how Mahomes progresses. But, man, he's got some crazy things going on with how he's practicing fully. But, I mean, hell, he's got a body unlike mine. That's for sure. Meanwhile, down in Houston, The Houston Texans took on the Miami Dolphins. It was a kind of close contest in a key AFC South matchup as Derek Stingley Jr. nabbed 2 key interceptions off of Tua Tagovailoa in the fourth quarter to help the Texans secure the win and eventually secure the AFC South, beating the Miami Dolphins 20-12. The Texans, solid performance coming out of the bye, but you certainly want to have more, a much more inspiring performance, especially in the next game against the Chiefs, against the Ravens, like 2 more quality opponents, like down the stretch. So they're gonna need a repeat performance out of their defense and something a little bit better from CJ Stroud in that offense. So that Texans team, they really got to step their game up, coming relatively soon against Kansas City. Meanwhile, for the Miami Dolphins, that's basically a wrap for the remaining playoff hopes. Tua, once again, didn't play relatively good against a good playoff team, throwing 2 picks to Stingley, and then turning the ball over twice. Not necessarily sure if Tua was the one that committed those fumbles, but nonetheless, the Dolphins as a whole, they fumbled the ball twice, lost them both. Yeah. This Miami team, they tried their best to come back from a 2-6 start without Tua. When it came to facing the best of the best in the AFC, and then of course they faced the Packers, just couldn't get it done. Just couldn't get it done again. Meanwhile, in a game that somebody had to win, in a game where your draft stock was on the line, pal, the New York Jets took on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Devontae Adams took a 40-yards after catch to set up Breece Hall's go-ahead touchdown run at the goal line, and Sauce Gardner sealed the quote-unquote win with the interception on Mac Jones as the Jets beat the Jacksonville Jaguars 32-25. And when you look at this game for the New York Jets, you saw how Aaron Rodgers played, and you saw how Devontae Adams, that old connection, that old familiar connection between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, they went ham on this game. They took over this game. And you just think to yourself, where the hell was this kind of performance? Where the hell was this kind of magic from Rodgers? Mainly from Aaron Rodgers, this whole season. And when Devontae Adams came along mid-season, where was this since he came along? Where the hell was this effort from this entire Jets team all season? Seriously. Where was that? So, it makes you wonder, are they going to keep Aaron Rodgers next season? If they play like they did today, maybe even the final 3 games? It's something to think about. Meanwhile, at least if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, by winning, you certainly won this game. Fuck Chris Myers, fuck Mark Schlereth, they're dumbasses questioning the Jaguars' all-eliteness of purposely allowing Breece Hall to score the go-ahead touchdown with a minute left to go. It's come on, man. You saw the writing on the wall, pal. You saw what Shaheed and Tony Khan and the Young Bucks were writing up the script for with what the Jaguars were doing with allowing Breece Hall to score the go-ahead touchdown. The Jaguars need to make up for their own dumbassery that they did last week by quote-unquote winning that game last week. They had to make it up somehow here. They got to remake up that ground in the NFL draft. Come on, pal. They knew what they were doing. Meanwhile, in the big hard, that is New Orleans, Spencer Rattler had to replace Jake Haener because he sucked so bad, as the Saints almost upset the Washington Commanders because, Spencer Rattler, he scored a touchdown at the very last second and had a chance to win. They rather than go to overtime, the Saints actually decided to go for the win. Unfortunately, they tried but failed the 2-point try and failed to upset the Washington Commanders. And by the skin of their teeth, the Commanders managed to hold off the Saints 20-19. And Washington was real lucky. They got real lucky that the Saints didn't win that game because holy hell, They really need their defense to hold the fort late in games because it nearly cost them in the end. It really nearly cost them in the end. It's like you really got to think that you got to do better. You have a home finale against Philadelphia next week, and then you get to face the Falcons on Sunday night. It's like, seriously, your defense really has to lock down late in these games because it's not doing it, man. It's not doing it. So, for the Saints, I mean, you're out of the playoff picture now. I mean, it's not official yet, but most certainly you are. If you are, as if you weren't already. But Darren Rizzi, the interim head coach, should at least consider starting Spencer Rattler the last 3 weeks because at least he can move the offense compared to, what was his name? Oh, yeah, Jake Haener. Like, my God, he was so bad. Like, why did they even consider starting him? Meanwhile, down in the big blue side of the Meadowlands, the Baltimore Ravens took on the New York Giants as Lamar Jackson was scorched earth on that big blue side with a 5-touchdown showing in an easy relative win for the Ravens, 35-14. The Giants, I mean, they still, quote unquote, won this game, maintaining their hold on the number 1 overall pick. I think it's between them and the Raiders, by the way. Meanwhile, for the Ravens, I mean, yeah, it's the Giants. I mean, not really much to take away from them. But if they want to, steal the division from the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're going to need this kind of repeat showing. Like, you got to carry over this kind of performance when you face the Steelers in what's going to be a very key game. Meanwhile, down in the Music City, the Bengals took on the Tennessee Titans as Joe Burrow threw for 3 first-half touchdowns, and Geno Stone nabbed a pick 6 that sent Will Levis to the bench in this turnover fest that the Bengals won 37-27. That 10-point win, clearly not reflective of how this game went. And this game, certainly a reminder of 2 things for both teams. The Titans, they cannot go into next year with Will Levis as a starting quarterback. Maybe you can have him as a backup, or I don't know what they're going to do with him. But they really need to go into next year with a new starting quarterback, whether it's in free agency or mainly through the draft. I'm not sure what their draft positioning is now, but certainly it has to be in the top 10. But either way, they have to go into next year with a brand new starting quarterback. Meanwhile, for the Tennessee Titans, not for the Tennessee Titans, for the Bengals too, they really need to retool their defense. I mean, sure, they managed to pick off Will Levis a couple of times, but I mean, come on, it's the Titans, man. Like, what more do you need? And they're also getting kind of gashed too in the air, so yeah, they also really need to retool the defense. Going into the late afternoon slate of games, as the Arizona Cardinals took on the rebuilding New England Patriots, James Conner helped the Cardinals pull away from them with 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns, beating New England 30-17. And it's just a reminder of, the offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing. Feed James Conner, man. Feed James Conner in that running game more, to help set up the offense. You notice, a difference with how Kyler Murray is much more at ease when you set up the rushing attack and then you go to Murray. You notice how much more flowing the passing game is after the running game is set up. Running the ball, especially with Connor, helps get Kyler Murray set up in the passing attack, and it just generally makes the offense more effective. So these last 3 games should see the coordinator, Drew Petzing, utilize James Conner more, utilize their other running backs more, reset up that running game so you can get Kyler Murray in that passing game better set up. Meanwhile, in the Mile High City, the Indianapolis Colts took on the Denver Broncos, and oh boy, the Colts had so many chances to win this game. They are actually up on the Denver Broncos. And oh boy, Jonathan Taylor, man, what did you do? What did you do, man? This fatal mistake, Jonathan Taylor just had to open the door for the Broncos to score 24 unanswered points in the second half. And this was a key game for both teams. And then Jonathan Taylor just literally fumbled it away. He just literally dropped the ball on it. And the Broncos boosted their own playoff hopes beating the Colts 31-13. So, yeah, if you look at the Colts, you can look at why the season went wrong. I mean, not, aside from the 2-game stretch with Joe Flacco and the benching of Anthony Richardson, you can look at this game too. And Jonathan Taylor's dumbassery of, I thought I went over the goal line. I thought he scored a touchdown when clearly you dropped the ball and it right before the goal line, and then nope, it was a touchback. That's where your season died. That's where your season died. Okay, and then you decided to go for a trick play, and then only to have pick sixth by Nick Bonino. Like, bro, come on, man. What are you doing? Oh, my Lord. Like, I understand. The Colts, honestly, they wouldn't have made much of an impact in the playoff dance anyway. But, I mean, it still would have been nice for Anthony Richardson to get an extra game of experience to make up for, again, the lost season that he had last year. Like, all those games missed. I keep going back to that because the man needs more reps. So, alas, Taylor's cockiness, fumbling, deciding to drop the ball right before the goal line, and then, of course, the trick play that absolutely failed, and the Colts never recovered it. They never recovered from there. They opened the door for Denver to strike absolutely right back. Speaking of Denver, man, what a 180 performance, man. What a way to turn the tide in their favor after a first half that they really struggled in. Throwing 3 interceptions by Bo Nix, but then you turn it right around with 3 touchdowns to end the game. The defense played much better as well, relentlessly getting after Anthony Richardson, and then, like I said, turning that trick play into a pick six that pretty much effectively ended the game. So, yeah, this Denver group is really resilient, and that's what you exactly want, especially heading into another big game on a Thursday night that could get them one step closer to finally getting back into the playoffs after 8 years? So, yeah, props to Denver, man. Props to Denver for getting back into that game. Meanwhile, into a potential Super Bowl preview that turned pretty ugly pretty fast. Josh Allen, the Bills, found their way into the end zone on a majority of their chances, but the Lions kept coming back, and the Bills had to secure a late onside kick to get a wild win, beating the Lions 48-42, snapping the Lions' 11-game winning streak. And I gotta say this about the Lions: all those injuries, I think, are starting to finally catch up to them. Like, they had 3 more injuries, season-ending injuries, by the way. Carlton Davis, Khalil Dorsey, Aleem McNeil. Oh man, injury mania. Just running wild. Like, what did Detroit do to deserve this, man? Like, seriously, what did Detroit do to have injury mania run wild on him? I mean, it's one thing for a team like mine to deserve injury mania because, well, Super Bowl curse, baby. But Detroit, like, come on, man. Let them finish their story at least. But it's kind of frustrating to see. Like, they're doing so well. They're overcoming all that adversity, but against a team like the Bills, I mean, it really caught up to them. And it's not going to get any easier. Like, they're going this 2-game road trip now. I guess against the Bears. I mean, they'll probably take care of the Bears. And against my 49ers, like, they really got to lock up that NFC North and that top seed, or else their promising season, where they really didn't doing much better, it's gonna come crashing down in a hurry. Meanwhile, for the Buffalo Bills, like, another impressive performance, a very big bounce back performance from them. I mean, sure, they allowed more 40 points again, but they managed to come out of it with the win. Now you look at it, these final 3 weeks, it'll be interesting to see what the Bills do. They play the Patriots twice. I mean, not to say that don't sleep on them, but you never know what could happen. Like, I'm not saying rest your starters because, again, you can't sleep on the Patriots twice. You can't sleep on the Jets twice, especially with, how Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams played. But you still got a number one seed to play for. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not the Chiefs win these last 3 games as well. And if they do, well, I mean, it's time to start considering what you do if you're the Buffalo Bills. So we'll see what the Bills do these last couple of weeks. I mean, but the focus is, continuing to build momentum for the playoffs. Meanwhile, down in the powder blue side of Los Angeles, the Chargers, oof. They certainly need some answers because Baker Mayfield and the Bucs took over the second half, outscoring the Chargers 27-0, beating LA 40-17. And the Bucs, man, they're on fire right now. This is probably their best win of the year. And it comes at a time where they're continuing to distance themselves from the Falcons. The offense is white hot in the second half. They were taking advantage of the defense's ability to get to Justin Herbert and getting him off the field quickly. And they have a real good chance to seal up this division relatively quick if they keep playing this well, especially going into an important Sunday night game next week. Meanwhile, if you're the Clippers, the Chargers, man, like, what is going on with them? Like, the defense, they got roasted by Baker and the Bucs. And Herbert and the offense, like, they can't move the ball past midfield in the second half. It's like something is clearly missing with this team. Something happened with this team. And I don't know if it's going to be fixed anytime soon. Meanwhile, in the Battle of PA, Jalen Hurts' 2 touchdowns to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith helped the Philadelphia Eagles win that battle and assured there's no issues between that passing trio as the Eagles beat the Steelers 27-13. And if you look at the Steelers right now, they're in the playoffs thanks to the Colts losing their game. But, the way that they played, though, the Steelers, you should be a little bit concerned because this team's pretty beatable once opposing defenses can contain Russell Wilson and opposing offenses can get around the Steelers' defense, especially the front seven, especially with a front seven that, once again, has an injured TJ Watt. So, this is kind of a concerning performance if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers going into the playoffs once again. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles, a pretty solid performance from them. And this is probably the best news for them coming out week number 15 because they're right on the heels of the Detroit Lions for the NFC's top seed. So, Philly should feel pretty good right now, just as long as they keep their good fortunes up, especially with the last 3 games of the season looking pretty tantalizing at the moment. Then we had the Sunday Night Football game for week number 15 as the Packers defense laid the sack down on both Geno Smith and Sam Howell in an Emerald City beatdown of the Seahawks. Packers took them down 30-13. And, man, if you're the Seahawks, the good news is Geno Smith didn't suffer any major injury to his knee. But the bad news is, at the moment, you don't know if he's going to play the next week. And his backup, Sam Howell, didn't exactly put on an inspiring performance. So if they have to roll with Sam Howell for another week or two, then that NFC West and Seattle's playoff hopes, kiss that goodbye. Then we had a Monday Night Football doubleheader, and, you can at least watch this over Monday Night Raw. Like, really, what the hell is that? Oh, what we got with Monday Night Raw? Well, let's start with the first game. As Bears football went to good effect, pal, as a pair of touchdowns from Aaron Jones and Cam Akers and a relentless defensive swarm on Caleb Williams earned the Vikings the whiteout win, 30-12 over the Chicago Bears. And those winter whiteout uniforms, man, looking pretty good for the Minnesota Vikings, even the helmets too. So Minnesota right now, just like Philadelphia, they have a real shot to win the NFC's top seed with their final 3 games, just as long as they keep playing to their standard. But with Minnesota, it's more than likely going to come down to the final week between them and Detroit. With Detroit, they got serious issues right now with their defense. They still got to play the 49ers before their game against Minnesota. So, yeah. This Vikings team, yeah, this is going to come down to the wire between Minnesota and Detroit for the top seed and the division, potentially. Then we had the other Monday night game between the Atlanta Falcons and the Las Vegas Raiders in an offensively inept game. Yeah, this was an offensive game to watch, as this offensive game almost saw a near upset from the Raiders. But Desmond Ridder, facing his old team, his second attempt at a Hail Mary to try and win the game was intercepted by Jesse Bates, as the Falcons snapped a 4-game losing skid to beat the Raiders 15-9. But at least if you're the Raiders, they protected the tank. Tank for Sanders, tank for Shadir. At least they protected that, pal. But when you look at the Falcons, they may have finally won a game, but oh boy. Like, how do you struggle? How do you still struggle this bad against a very crappy team? Kirk Cousins, sure, he finally snapped his touchdownless streak, but you still performed poorly against the Raiders of all teams. Like, why is he still in this funk? Why is he in this funk so much? And if they pulled a repeat of this against even crappier teams like the Giants, the Panthers, and the Commanders are not a crappy team, but if they do that against Washington in prime time, they're done. They are done. And, well, we'll get to Kirk Cousins because he's going to be the topic of, the week that will be in this part of the episode. Kirk Cousins, he could be one and done in Atlanta after this kind of performance on another Monday night. So, stars of the week for week number 15, 2 Bills. Josh Allen, 23-34, 362 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, while also scoring 2 touchdowns on the ground with 68 rushing yards. Running back James Cook for the Buffalo Bills, 11 carries, 105 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Texans defense. They got 3 interceptions off of Tua Tagovailoa, while also sacking him 3 times. They forced a fumble off of Tua or someone else, and they allowed 12 points. But the main thing was they got those key turnovers to get the win against the Miami Dolphins and secure the AFC South. So that was your week. That was week number 15. How did your team do? How did your team did not do this past week? Let me know in the comments on YouTube or slide into the DMs on my socials at Very Cold Lasagna. So now, as I drink this sip of water, for all my audio listeners out there, that was a sip of water. Let's get into the week that will be week number 16. We're down to the third to last week of the regular season. Teams are getting ready for their trip to Cancun, while other teams are trying to desperately try and get to this postseason dance in January. Well, the select few that are already in, they're trying to get better positioning into the playoffs. So that being said, let's take a look at the playoff picture as we speak. So we already know who's in. The Bills, the Chiefs, they are the division champions that have already locked up their spots. And so have the Houston Texans, who have just recently secured the AFC South. But on the NFC side of things, we have the Lions, the Eagles, the Vikings. And going back to the AFC side, we also have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have secured their spot in the playoffs as well. So we already also know who is on the January Cancun cruise that's set to take off on sea once the regular season ends. And that is the Giants, the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Patriots, the Jets, the Browns, the Titans, the Panthers, and the Bears. So more than half of the league is ready to go on this January cruise to Cancun. And yeah, there'll be even more teams ready to go on this January Cancun cruise. But first, let's take a look at this week's clinching possibilities. Who will be in the January postseason dance? And starting with the winner of this Thursday night's Broncos-Chargers game, it's relatively simple for the winner of this game. Denver wins, they're in. They finally snapped their postseason drought of 8 years if they win this game. But for the Chargers, if they win, along with some losses by the Colts and the Dolphins, they're in. Meanwhile, for the Steelers and the Ravens, Steelers win, they seal up the AFC North. The Ravens win, they're in the playoffs. Meanwhile, for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders, the winner of that game, the Eagles seal up the NFC East. The Commanders win. The Commanders win, they're in, along with some losses by the Falcons and the Seahawks or the Rams, and while also keeping their hopes for the division alive for another week. So the Packers, they're in if they win against the Saints. For the Chiefs, they clinch the top seed in the AFC with a win, and by some miracle, the Patriots and Drake May, they upset the Buffalo Bills in their matchup. So some things are at stake here, and what also is at stake is the Cancun Cruise in January. Who's eligible to join this week? Those teams are the Saints, the Cowboys, the Cardinals, and as well as my San Francisco 49ers, the Dolphins, the Bengals, and the Colts. So all those teams are gonna potentially join along the January Cancun Cruise this week. So let's look at the week that will be week number 16, kicking off with a major game that I mentioned already. The 9-5 Denver Broncos taking on the 8-6 LA Chargers. So yeah, like I talked about earlier, Broncos win, they're in. The Chargers win, and some help from the opposition of the Colts and the Dolphins, they're in. So it's a major game for both of these teams. Playoff hopes in this week 6 rematch that got flexed over the original skid marks in Bungles game. So good decision by the NFL, especially as we got to this point now. Yeah, the playoff lives for both of these teams are on the line in this one. And I think the momentum is on the side of Denver right now. Like, they really are. Sure, they struggled in their game against the Colts in the first half, but they really picked up the slack in the second half. So momentum is really on their side right now. And the Chargers, they really need to find their stride once again, because they got their butts whooped against the Bucs. They really need to bounce back, coming off of 2 bad losses against the Chiefs and the Bucs. So they really got to have this game here. Meanwhile, we have a Saturday doubleheader, the first of 2 to end this. No, first of 3, mind you, in the last 3 weeks of the season. There's 3 Saturday slates. This is the first one as the Texans at 9-5 take on the 13-1 Chiefs in a potential playoff preview to kick off this Saturday doubleheader. The Chiefs look to lock up the AFC's top seed, hosting CJ Stroud and the Texans, but some question marks about this one, because they might not have Patrick Mahomes in this game with the high ankle sprain. Again, he is practicing in full, despite the high ankle sprain. But if he doesn't play in this game, you will get Carson Wentz. You will get Carson Wentz starting against CJ Stroud and the Texans. I mean, you be the judge of whether Carson Wentz can help the Chiefs win this game, but we shall see. We shall see which version of Carson Wentz we will get on Saturday. Meanwhile, in a critical AFC North matchup, the Steelers take a 10-4 take on the Baltimore Ravens at 9-5. The Ravens just 1 game back of the Steelers, but the Steelers, all they have to do is win to basically wrap up this division race in this Week 11 matchup. So, yeah, a key matchup for the Ravens that they really need to have if they want to keep this division race open for however long they need to. So the Steelers also have to bounce back from a bad loss in Philadelphia, especially offensively. And if they want to lock up this division, they got to have a better performance on offense. Going to the Sunday slate of games, starting with the early morning portion, as the Falcons will be trotting out their rookie quarterback. Yeah, no Kirk Cousins. he has been sent to the bench. Yes, their $90 million quarterback, pal. No, not even $90 million. $180 million quarterback, Kirk Cousins, has been sent to the bench. And in comes in the quarterback that, we signed to this big fat deal. But let's use the number 8 overall pick to draft the quarterback anyway in the first round. So in comes in Michael Penix Jr. They're going to debut Michael Penix Jr. while the Falcons are still in the playoff race as they take on the New York Giants, the tanking New York Giants. So, I mean, I understand the decision. Because Kirk Cousins has been struggling really, really bad, and they need a spark on this offense. So, I'm intrigued. I'm at least intrigued to see how Penix is going to do in this game against a Giants defense that's been okay on the front seven, but everywhere else, they're pretty bad. So let's see what Michael Penix Jr. can do against a very bad Giants team as they try to keep pace with the Bucs for the NFC South. Meanwhile, down in Carolina, Kyle Murray and the Cards at 7-7 head out southeast to keep its NFC West hopes alive against the Panthers and Bryce Young at 3-11. Bryce Young, he had a bad game against the Dallas Cowboys, as expected. Bryce Young will try to make 3 more lasting impressions for his coach and the front office to maybe stick around for another year or so. Meanwhile, the Lions at 12-2 will have to overcome the latest rash of injury mania running wild on them on defense as they have to begin their last 2-game road trip of the year, of the regular season at least. That starts with this Thanksgiving rematch against Caleb Williams and the Bears at 4-10. And, well, can Bears football get any more worse than this? That's all I can say about Chicago. Anthony Richardson and the Colts at 6-8 are going to try to have to keep its playoff hopes alive and bounce back from a brutal, mistake-ridden loss against Denver when they host Will Levis. And, no, not Will Levis, because they also benched their quarterback. They're going back to, I believe, Mason Rudolph. So they're going to be trying out Mason Rudolph once again when they host the Titans, when the Colts host the Titans in this Week 6 rematch. So, it just tells you how much of a quarterback the Titans need desperately at this point in the season. Meanwhile, the Rams at 8-6, they have taken over first place in the NFC West, but will have to keep winning for it to stay that way as they visit the gangrene side of the Meadowlands to face Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. And the Rams got to do all they can to keep firmly grasp on first place in the division over Seattle and Arizona. Meanwhile, in this critical NFC East rematch from week number 11, it's a pivotal one for both teams. The Philadelphia Eagles at 12-12 look to wrap up the division with a win when they visit Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, who look to avenge that loss and seal up their playoff spot with the win and some help at 9-5. I imagine the Commanders will still find a way to get the playoff spot regardless, but if they somehow find a way to win this game against Philadelphia, they're right back in the race for the division title. Well, we'll see. Crazy if things have happened. Meanwhile, the Bengals will once again have to fight to stay alive and get some more help for one more week at 6-8. But barring anything crazy, that should be easier said than done, facing the listed skid marks, who will be trotting out Dorian Thompson-Robinson over the turnover crazy Jameis Winston and the skid marks at 3-11 in this week 7 rematch. So, can the Bengals defense do anything at this point? Going to the late afternoon slate of games, the Vikings head out northwest at 12-12 to inch even closer on the Lions' lead in the NFC North when they play a 8-6 Seahawks team that they really need to regain ground with the Rams in the NFC West. But the Seahawks, they could be without Geno Smith, but that remains to be seen. So if they have to go with Sam Howell, not exactly good for the Seahawks in this key game in the NFC. Meanwhile, in a game that was flexed into this late afternoon slate, Josh Allen and the 11-3 Bills return home for their last 2-game homestand of the regular season, which starts with the first of 2 meetings in 3 weeks against Drake May and the 3-11 Patriots. And I just have to question, what the hell is that uniform combination for the Bills? Like, are they trying to be the Patriots? Like, are they trying to be like New England so bad? I mean, it's not none of my business anyway, but it's just like when I saw that on Twitter, I'm like, why are they trying to be like New England? Like, what are you doing? Like, what is that? Like, the matching white helmet. I mean, the red jersey. I thought it was gonna be the red pants too, the color rush pants. But it's like, why did you match the white pants? It's like that Spider-Man meme. Like, what are you doing? Anyway, and this is an interesting game. It's a choo-choo tank game between the Jacksonville Jaguars at 3-11 taking on the 2-12 Las Vegas Raiders. Someone has to sacrifice their draft positioning, pal. And, well, who wants to throw it away more as the Jaguars head out to Sin City for another one of those tank games to play the QB-less Raiders? So, once again, who wants it less? Who wants to throw it away more? Find out this Sunday in Las Vegas. So, that should be an interesting one. Like, who wants to throw it away more, pal? Meanwhile, in a much more less interesting one, it's a winner go home game, but I mean, the playoff lives for both my San Francisco 49ers at 6-8 and the 6-8 Miami Dolphins, well, yeah, they're at stake, even though their seasons are basically done already. But at this point, they're playing for pride, and I mean, hell, at this point, that's what matters, right? Pride, maturity. I mean, crushed hopes and dreams, the failure to finish a story. Yeah, that's what it all means at this point. Then we had the Sunday Night Football game for week number 16, as Baker Mayfield and the 8-6 Bucks look to further distance themselves from the Falcons in the NFC South race when they head out to Big D to face a desperate 6-8 Cowboys team facing elimination. But it's just like, okay, the Cowboys are still fighting for their playoff lives in a race that they're probably not going to make in anyway. Okay, let them have their fun. It's the Cowboys on prime time. All right. I mean, crazier things to happen, but still. Then we have the Monday Night Football game for week number 16 to wrap up this episode. The New Orleans Saints at 5-9. Like, okay. But they head out, the leftovers of the Saints, they head out to Lambeau to take on Jordan Love and the 10-4 Packers as they look to seal up their playoff spot in what should be a relatively seamless, stressless matchup for Green Bay as they look to secure their playoff spot. I mean, crazier things happen, but I think the Packers should take care of this one. So that is your week that will be week number 16 in this 2024 campaign. The season's winding down. The playoff race is tightening up. Playoff spots are being secured, and the spots for the January Cancun cruise is also being sealed up as well. And yeah, spots for both of those things will be winding down as well, pal. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know your predictions, your picks, and your things that you're keeping track of for your team or for other teams. Let's have a conversation about it. And let's also have a conversation about the week that was, week number 15. Let's share our takes on YouTube or slide into those DMs on my socials at Very Cold Lasagna. But anyway, that is it for this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I have been your filthy casual host, Dylan Lasagna, with another filthy casual episode of this podcast with all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And I know I'm kind of feeling the ill will, but I'm trying to manage to overcome it. Trying to give you guys some good feels right now, some filthy casual takes, like I always try to do. That's just what we have to do here. Even if we're under the weather, or at least I'm trying to feel it, but you know what I mean. But anyway, thank you for tuning to this episode number 235 of this icy yet spicy podcast with those filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And until the next one, keep the lasagna very cold. We'll be back with another week of what that was and will be around the NFL, week number 16, and then week number 17 as we get deeper and deeper into the end of the regular season with more playoff spots being secured and all that jazz. And yeah, even more football to talk about in the next episode. But until then, peace out.